Zhang Hao was a straight-up hunk. After work, he hit the bars, slammed drinks with his brothers, and hit on girls without a shred of hesitation. Life was simple, just the way he liked it, until fate punched him in the gut. Thrown into a world where women ruled and men cowered, Hao stuck out like a sore thumb. Here, guys waited to be picked like helpless flowers while women chased them down without shame. His rugged looks made it worse, turning him into a prime target wherever he went. Thugs lurked in alleys, girls flirted without shame, and even at home, his bombshell stepsister schemed to drag him into her dirty little projects. Then came the cruel joke. The goddess of this world demanded he flip the script and prove real men still existed. If he failed, he would slowly rot into another submissive pretty boy, lost forever. Hao had no choice. Stand tall, dominate, and show this upside-down world what a real man looked like, or get swallowed whole. It started when Hao woke up in a pastel nightmare. A self-proclaimed alpha male, he figured it had to be a prank, until he looked around the room and froze. Last thing he remembered was dragging himself home after another soul-sucking shift. Running on caffeine and spite, he'd muttered that the 9-to-9 grind was killing him. Then he saw it, a glowing blood moon. Squinting up, he thought even the moon was doing overtime, and then everything went black. When he opened his eyes, he screamed. He was in a completely different body, like waking up in a stranger's body was just a Monday thing. Before he could fully freak out, a voice called out, his dad cheerfully reminding him about shopping plans with someone named Long. Also dinner with Aunt Zhang and her daughter. He even added that as a boy, a little skincare like Long's wouldn't hurt. Then reminds him to stay safe when he heads out. Silence fell again as Hao stood frozen, brain buffering at 2%, trying to grasp who he was and what twisted reality show he'd dumped in. He couldn't tell if his dad had lost it or if he was going crazy. His phone buzzed. Long was calling, telling him to open the door. A flash of memory hit him. Long, the tattooed, all-muscles guy he used to look up to, not anything girly. Hao eagerly rushed to the door, expecting to see the true man. But when he opened it, a ridiculously pretty guy stood there, complaining about Hao's delay as it was dangerous for him to wait that long. Hao scanned around, waiting for the real Long to pop out. Instead, the guy dropped the bomb. He was Long. Hao's dad appeared, and immediately started praising his stylish appearance. Long blushing, soaking up the compliments. Long reminded Hao about their plans for facial treatments. Hao couldn't tell if it was a prank, or if he'd been ice-gayed into a gender-reverse drama. In this world, gender roles were flipped. Men now acted like women, and women took on male roles. Women were the breadwinners, and men stayed home, raising kids. As they walked outside, girls swooned while Long casually listed their girly to-do list: face masks, nail salon, skincare run, and pepper spray for pushy women. Hao was ready to explode. In this world, men were soft and women were beasts. Desperate to reclaim some masculinity, Hao dragged Long into a tattoo shop and demanded dragon tattoos. Long panicked, asking if Hao had lost it. Hao insisted this was how real men were made. Two girls inside gave them side eyes. One muttered boys weren't allowed tattoos. The other wondered where these cute weirdos came from. Hao ripped off his shirt, yelling for tattoo to prove his manliness. The girls just smirked. One offered to help him undress. The other joked about stopping him before he dropped his pants. Long panicked, trying to cover him, but Hao was already too far gone. With a loud clack, Hao decided today, by chaos or ink, he'd become a certified man. Exhausted, Hao stumbled home, only to find a gorgeous woman, making him realize he'd entered the wrong house. Embarrassed, he quickly shut the door. At dinner, he spotted her again with another unfamiliar woman. His dad reminded him they were Aunt Zhang and her daughter, Qin, and that Hao had bolted earlier. Hao apologized, saying he forgot. Aunt Zhang laughed it off. Bits of memory returned. His dad had remarried, and soon, they'd all be moving in together. After dinner, Hao crashed in his room, drained and annoyed. This world was insane. Men were all glammed up. They even had periods. Refusing to turn into a pampered doll, Hao swore this had to be a prank. He needed a way back. Just then, Qin strolled in, smirking like she owned the place. Hao froze as she climbed onto the bed and grabbed his hands. Panicked, he apologized for nothing, but she just hugged him, burying his face into her plots like a living pillow. Brain fried, Hao glitched hard. Qin asked if he felt sick. Red-faced, he muttered he felt amazing. Staring at her beauty, he wondered if maybe getting steamrolled by a hot baddie wasn't the worst fate. That night, while Hao was asleep, a strange shadow appeared outside the window. He opened his eyes, instantly alert. A soft voice called out to Zhao. Annoyed, Zhao groaned that it was the middle of the night. But then he froze. Another ridiculously hot baddie stood right at the head of his bed. He screamed in shock, asking who she was. The girl stared at him calmly, tilting her head slightly, wondering how he didn't recognize her. She moved closer, her eyes glowing faintly. She said she was the one who brought him here. Hao's mind flashed back. He remembered the incident, the moment everything went dark and he was transported into this ridiculous world. His memory clicked, and he sat up, furious. He demanded to know who she really was and why he had suddenly been yeeted into pink pajamas and dumped into this crap hole. She just smiled, totally unfazed by his rage, and introduced herself as the goddess of the blood moon. She reminded Hao how he used to complain that no girls were ever into him, how he was still a lonely virgin clinging to his body pillow. Now there he had hot fangirls and secret admirers. She asked if that wasn't quite marvelous. Hao yelled, cursing the so-called marvel. These people were completely insane. He shouted at her to send him back immediately. She didn't budge. Instead, she replied that if he was so eager to return, he'd first need to complete a mission. Curious and suspicious, Hao asked what mission. She told him to remember how he used to brag about being a real man in his old world. His mind drifted back. He remembered those times clearly. How he used to talk about what made a true man. Only sisses played with dolls, real men built model kits. Real men hit the gym, pumped iron, and walked around like cocky show-offs. He used to laugh at people struggling with heavy books, flexing that he could twist off a bottle cap with one hand. The goddess explained the mission. Hao had to become a real man in this female-dominated world. Only then would he gain the strength to open a portal and return home. But if he failed, he'd better start practicing how to walk in heels because the world would assimilate him. That word echoed in Hao's brain like a horror movie line. Hao screamed, saying that sounded suspiciously like code for becoming a sissy. She nodded slowly, saying he could phrase it that way if he liked. Then her form began to dissolve, fading like mist in moonlight. She hoped he would find some enjoyment in his time here. Panicked, Hao tried to stop her, saying that she hadn't even told him how to become a real man. While Hao standing in the middle of a gender-bent nightmare, but poof, she was gone. The next morning, Hao slowly opened his eyes, wondering if that whole bizarre visit from the so-called goddess of the blood moon was just some weird dream. But then his eyes caught something strange on the floor, a girl's ribbon. His heart sank, so it wasn't a dream after all. That mission she mentioned, becoming a real man in this crazy, gender-flipped world, it was actually real. As he started brushing his teeth, his mind whirled with confusion. What did it even mean to be a real man here? The thought made him boil in frustration. And then, he looked up. His reflection in the mirror stared back. He looked like a complete sissy. One thing was certain, whatever a real man was supposed to look like, it definitely wasn't this. He figured maybe it was best to just learn more about this insane world first. The whole becoming a real man thing could wait. Later, Hao sat cross-legged in the middle of the room, completely surrounded by newspapers. The headlines were straight out of a fever dream. A 21-year-old male college student auctioned his virginity to a rich real estate lady for $1 million. Another story talked about a man who killed his wife after enduring unbearable humiliation, and the court ruled it was fine because marital rape was legal here. Hao was shocked to his core as wondering if this was real life or some messed up simulation. But that wasn't even the craziest part. His eyes landed on a book titled Men's Virginity Test. He was surprised to know that there's a way in this world to determine if a man is still a virgin as he skimmed through it. Apparently, in this world, when men lost their virginity, they turned into limp noodles, like their bones turned to jelly. In some cases, they collapse on the spot, unable to move. It was supposedly a natural reaction and totally unfakeable. After reading all that, he slumped onto the floor, mentally wrecked. He cursed that so-called goddess. He decided he needed to believe in science, not this fantasy garbage. Maybe what happened that night was some weird magnetic field anomaly. He started thinking like a mad scientist, scribbling notes, trying to figure out the phenomenon that brought him here. Eventually, reality kicked in. He had no idea what he was doing. He wasn't some science genius. But then it hit him. He could just hire someone to do the research for him. Then came another punch to the gut. He was a dead broke high schooler who couldn't even afford a coffee date. So first things first, he needed to make some money. Just as he stepped out of his room, fate threw him a curvy ball. Sister Kin stood there, plots on full display, as they seemed to defy gravity. She smiled warmly, saying she was glad he was finally awake. Apparently, she'd even made him breakfast. Hal flustered. His eyes darted anywhere but her cleavage. A sneaky little thought crept in. If most girls in this world were built like Sister Kin, maybe getting stuck here wasn't the worst thing ever. As Hal was getting ready for school, he looked at himself in the mirror and had to admit that his face was undeniably handsome, although with a hint of femininity. As he finished getting ready, he stepped out of his room, thinking that today marked his first day attending school in this world. When Hal entered the dining room, he saw that everyone was already gathered. Kin called for him to join them for breakfast, and as he looked around, he noticed Aunt Zhang playfully smacking his dad's butt. Hal was stunned to see Aunt Zhang openly flirting with his dad. Afterward, Hal left for school, telling his family that Long was waiting for him. On their way to school, Long whipped out a shiny new lipstick like it was a prized artifact and asked if it suited him. Apparently, it was the hottest shade of the year. He even struck a dramatic pout and leaned in for feedback. Hal, startled, put a hand on Long's face, mumbling for him to have some decency in public. As Long blinked in confusion, Hal stared at his childhood bro-turned-makeup model and wondered when things went so wrong. They used to bond over action figures and martial arts movies. Now it was all lip tints. Hal fell silent for a moment before deciding to share his plan with Long. Then, he told Long that he'd been thinking lately, and had decided to become a real man. Before he could even finish, Long gasped like he'd just confessed to joining a crime ring, and asked what he meant by wanting to become a real man. He added that the term had a red flag and might not be attractive to women. Hal couldn't help but smile slyly at this. Suddenly, Long grabbed Hal's hand and informed him that a peeping Tom was watching them. Hal followed Long's gaze and saw a girl in the corner, staring at them, thinking that high school boys were the juiciest. Hal wasn't concerned, thinking that since they were men, they didn't need to be afraid of her. He told Long not to worry, assuring him that if she came near them, he would send her flying with a powerful kick. Long, sweating in fear, reminded Hal that he was talking nonsense, as he couldn't even lift a brick. Pulling his hand away, Hal claimed that he used to be a formidable fighter, stopping Long from daydreaming. He then warned Long to head in the opposite direction. Just as they continued on, the girl approached and called them honey buns, but Long quickly grabbed Hal's hand, pulling him away with him. After reaching a safe location, both Hal and Long were panting from the run. Hal realized that he was already out of breath after such a short distance, while Long lamented that his makeup had been ruined by sweat. Hal was also sweating. Later, they arrived at school, and Hal was amazed by the size of the school. He thought that in this world, it appeared that girls handled most of the heavy lifting. Moreover, his family seemed quite wealthy, able to afford sending him to such an exclusive school. When Hal entered his class, he saw a guy holding a water bottle, struggling to open it. He asked a girl for help, but she replied that it was a piece of cake for her. Hal thought to himself that men in this world were truly feeble, unable to open something as simple as a water bottle. He stepped forward, snatched the bottle from the girl's hand, and offered to help. Thinking that it couldn't be that hard, he tried to open the bottle, but it felt extremely tight. He applied more force, but still couldn't open it, making him sweat. Realizing that it might be due to his posture, he inhaled deeply and, even with all his force and the magical command "Open Sesame," he still couldn't get the bottle open. The guys around him looked at him in surprise as his fingers turned red from the force on the bottle's cap. He returned the bottle to the girl, apologizing that he couldn't open it. The girl, without a second thought, opened it instantly and handed it back to the boy. Hal gasped and panted, turning away, thinking to himself that he had truly become a complete failure, unable to even open a simple water bottle. Just as he turned around, a group of girls appeared, mocking him and asking if he wanted to try opening a bottle. Others chimed in, saying they would help him. Long, who had been standing nearby, saw Hal banging his head on the desk after the humiliation. Long tried to block the incoming girls, spinning a quick excuse that Hal was fine, just feeling unwell lately, which was why he had been acting a bit peculiar. Hal grunting in frustration, admitting to himself that not only was he weak, he could practically hear his pride shattering into 1,000 pieces. As Hal walked through the school lobby, he could hear groups of girls gossiping about him. Just then, Long called out from behind, asking him to wait so they could go to the restroom together. Hal was taken aback, thinking in disbelief that boys in this world actually went to the restroom in pairs. There was no way he could do that. His masculinity, what little was left of it, was on the line. He knew he had to find a way to slip away unnoticed like a ninja, but probably more like a clumsy one. As he kept walking, the whispers grew louder, like a bunch of fangirls gushing about how adorable he looked, admiring his smooth, well-defined arms. Some commented on how enhanced his jayat was and how long his legs looked, while others pointed out that his behind was the epitome of perfection. Overhearing their comments, Hao felt like he was about to get a nosebleed from embarrassment. He realized that while it was undeniable he had a handsome face, his physical strength was severely lacking. Something had to change. Pulling out his phone, he thought it was time to find a place where he could exercise and build himself up. He scrolled through his options and saw an ad for a beginner's Muay Thai class. It looked promising, and he made a mental note to check it out later. But it wasn't just about building muscles, he needed to strengthen his mental resilience too. Deciding to jot all of this down, he opened his phone's memo app. Just then, his deskmate Yuan suddenly appeared beside him. She leaned in, asking what he was up to. Hao nearly jumped out of his skin, letting out a startled scream. He hadn't even heard her approach and wondered for a moment if she was a ghost. Yuan giggled and told him that he had been so absorbed in his phone that he didn't notice her. As she inched even closer, she teasingly asked if he was texting a special someone. The sudden closeness made Hao blush. When she leaned over him, her inner view popped into frame. He gulped like a dehydrated camel. Yuan casually took his hand and guided it straight to her melons like it was a routine handshake. Complimented his hands, called them pretty. Hao screamed like he'd just touched a hot stove and yanked it back like it burned. Realizing girls in this world weren't just bold, they were downright terrifying. He told Yuan to stop it, warning her that people were watching. Yuan looked confused by his reaction and said that something felt off about him today. She remarked that he never used to act this way. Hao brushed it off, claiming that she was just imagining things, insisting that he had always been like this. She stared at him silently, noticing how much he was sweating. With concern, she moved closer and asked if he had slept well the previous night. She offered to help, claiming she had learned a set of ancestral massage techniques that could ease his tension. Hao tried to decline, but when she touched him, he was surprised by how strong she was. Just as things were getting awkward again, the school bell rang. Seizing the opportunity, Hao quickly pushed her away and told her that class had begun and she should return to her seat. As the teacher entered the classroom, she instructed everyone to take their seats since class was about to begin. She introduced herself as Miss Ma, the English and homeroom teacher for Class 3. While flipping through the pages of his textbook, Hao noted that he could understand everything with ease. It had been years since he graduated high school in his original world, and back then, English used to be his worst subject. He remembered how he used to struggle hopelessly with it, but now, everything in the textbook seemed like a breeze. For once, he felt a wave of relief and satisfaction. This was one clear advantage of being in this bizarre new world. He was suddenly one of the top students. He glanced at Miss Ma, already picturing her calling on him so he could flex his non-existent ick. For once, he'd be seen as the brainiac, not the guy who can't lift a brick. Then it happened. She called his name. His eyes sparkled, realizing this was it, his anime protagonist moment. But instead of asking him a question, Miss Ma looked concerned. She asked Hao if he wasn't feeling well, mentioning that his mouth had been twitching the whole time like he was having a seizure. The whole class turned to stare. Internally, Hao was fuming, cursing Miss Ma for ruining his big moment. He cleared his throat awkwardly and assured her that his mouth was just fine. She must have been mistaken. From the back, he overheard a few of the girls whispering among themselves. They were suspicious about his behavior, wondering aloud what had happened to their crush. To them, he seemed really off today. Hearing their silly gossip made his face turn red with embarrassment. He clutched his head, internally screaming that they were the crazy ones, not him. At that moment, he decided he just wanted to vanish and leave all this nonsense behind. As Hao and Long walked through the school grounds, Long glanced over and noticed something seemed off. Hao looked unusually tired. When Long asked if he was okay, Hao simply replied that he might not have gotten enough rest last night. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just tiredness, he was utterly exhausted to the core. All the bizarre incidents of this strange new world kept flashing through his mind, and the overwhelming pressure of fitting into this upside-down society was wearing him out. For a brief moment, He even found himself missing his 9-to-9 job. As crazy as it sounded, studying in this world's high school was somehow even more stressful. While the two of them stood there in silence, a girl suddenly approached, saying she had something important to tell Hao. Holding out a small gift box, she confessed that she had liked him for a while and asked if he would be her boyfriend. Hao froze, quickly realizing this was the kind of thing guys usually did in his world. Here, everything was flipped. After a brief pause, he gave a polite but firm apology, explaining that he had no plans to date anyone at the moment, then gently told her goodbye. As the girl walked away, Long couldn't help but comment with a dramatic sigh that even the top student in their grade had a crush on Hao. He confessed he was jealous. Hao stared blankly for a moment, then sighed and asked Long if they could just head to the cafeteria. At the cafeteria, Hao stood in line with Long, his mind swirling with indecision about what to eat. His eyes drifted to a nearby guy's plate, spotting a ridiculously small portion of food. He nudged Long and pointed it out, saying the guy must have the appetite of a bird. Long, a bit thrown off by Hao calling him that weird name. Then he casually replied that the guy was eating a normal portion, because every guy around here ate like that. When Long's turn came, he ordered Chinese cabbage and spinach, single small portions, and no rice at all. Hao blinked in disbelief, asking if Long really thought he wouldn't faint during the afternoon session with such a light meal. Long responded that Hao must have forgotten he was on a diet and had been eating greens only. Hao stayed silent, lost in thought, struggling to accept that the men here genuinely ate like birds. He reminded himself to order the largest portion available and jotted it down in his memo. When it was finally his turn, Hao boldly requested the largest serving of braised pork belly with a big bowl of rice. Long nearly choked on air, reminding Hao that if he ate like that, he'd get fat. Hao calmly replied that men needed food to build muscle. Around them, other guys were watching with raised brows, whispering if Hao was training for a food-eating contest. They stared at the greasy pork belly and counted the imaginary calories, secretly jealous that someone with Hao's body could eat like a beast and still look good. Meanwhile, a guy nearby narrowed his eyes at the scene, clearly ticked off, assuming Hao was showing off because of his popularity. His friend tried to calm him down, saying popular guys could do whatever they wanted. But the irritated guy grinned and decided they should at least say hi to him, or it'd look rude. Hao, however, was busy devouring his food like a man who hadn't eaten in days. Long leaned over, whispering that he needed to slow down or people would start laughing. Just then, a mocking voice called out from behind, throwing shade at Hao's mountain of food. The voice said only construction workers ate like that. Hao looked up and saw it was Feng from the 12th grade. He stared at him for a moment, asking who he even was. Feng froze, a little embarrassed as he reminded Hao they'd been in the self-study room together just a few days ago. Hao smirked, clearly messing with him, while Feng tried to joke back about Hao gaining weight. Feng then started lecturing Hao about how popular people needed to keep their weight in check. But Hao, completely unbothered, replied coldly that Feng might need to get his eyes checked before things got worse. Internally, Hao rolled his eyes at this two-faced clown. Then he hit back harder, asking Feng who gave him the right to look down on construction workers. He reminded him that if it weren't for those women toiling under the sun building the nation, people like Feng wouldn't be living such cushy lives. Feng's face fell as he started crying, wiping away tears and claiming he was only trying to help. From a distance, a group of girls gasped, gossiping about how Hao's words made Feng cry. They couldn't believe someone once so kind could become this cold. It seemed to them that time had really changed Hao's personality. Feng, sensing that the drama was slipping out of his control, hid a sneaky grin behind his sleeve, probably ready to fake a few tears next. But before he could launch into full-blown victim mode, a sharp voice cut through the cafeteria buzz. A purple-haired girl stepped forward and dropped her food tray right next to Hao's. She looked around and said flatly that Hao could eat however much he wanted, and if anyone had a problem with that, they could choke on it. She then locked eyes with Feng, sharp tone, and asked who the heck decided that eating a lot was some kind of crime. She called it what it was, blatant discrimination and prejudice. Feng looked like he wanted to shrink into his socks. But then, her voice mellowed as she turned back to Hao, saying he must have been really hungry today. Without skipping a beat, she scooped a generous portion of her own food onto his tray, casually adding that if that wasn't enough, she still had more. Hao just sat there, stunned, thinking maybe the heavens felt bad for messing with him so hard earlier. Because clearly, they were trying to make up for it now by sending yet another drop-dead gorgeous girl straight into the madness that was his life. As the purple-haired girl Ying took a seat right in front of Hao, Feng watched them with burning jealousy. He suddenly snapped, shouting at them and asking what they thought they were doing. Hao didn't even flinch, still enjoying his food as he calmly replied that if Feng had something to say, then he better speak up. But if it was just more whining about his eating habits, he should keep it to himself. Hao reminded him that he was a dude, and dudes eat however much they want. Long nearly fell off his chair from shock, that Hao calling himself a dude was basically a crime against beauty. If he kept spewing such uncultured nonsense, he'd destroy the flawless, delicate image everyone had of him. Meanwhile, Ying, completely unfazed by Long's theatrics, was sitting there with sparkles in her eyes. To her, Hao wasn't crude, he was captivating. Like a wild kitten that scratched furniture and knocked over vases, but still made you want to cuddle it forever. Feng, now one eye twitch away from a total meltdown, spun toward his group and called them a bunch of baboons for not backing him up sooner. He dramatically declared he'd never waste another crumb of kindness on this forsaken cafeteria. His group immediately scrambled to comfort him like loyal minions. One patted his back and said Ying must have been hypnotized by Hao's pretty boy face and just couldn't see what a degenerate he truly was. Another chimed in that Feng's personality was way superior, like obviously, a 5-star gentleman compared to that common street cat Hao. Feng tried to stay strong, telling himself that sooner or later, Ying would realize how vulgar and despicable Hao really was. Back at the table, Ying kept serving Hao with love in her eyes. Hao, confused by her overly affectionate behavior, leaned toward Long and asked who this girl even was. That's when Long dropped the bomb. Ying was from the next class and had been chasing after Hao for ages. She was also the basketball team captain. Hao, stunned, sat back with the thought that maybe he really was a chick magnet after all. Ying suddenly brought up the Game Heroes X Alliance, the one she had mentioned last time. She asked if Hao had tried it yet. Before Hao could answer, Long admitted that he had given it a shot, but it was too difficult for him. He added that maybe boys just weren't cut out for these kinds of games. Hao looked surprised, recognizing the game too, while Long turned to him and asked if he remembered saying that it was a girl's game and he wasn't interested in it. Long's words triggered something in Hao's mind. He couldn't believe this game actually existed in this world too, but it did seem like only girls played it here. Ying joined in, saying that even though there weren't any male pros in Heroes X Alliance, some guys still played it. She asked Hao why he wouldn't give it a try. Just as Hao got up from the table, he casually replied that he had played it before. He thought it was a pretty good game, so maybe he'd consider picking it up again. Then, brushing the crumbs off his hands, he told her he was heading back to class and asked Long to come with him. Long trotted after Hao. Meanwhile, Ying stayed at the table, rested her chin in her hands and sighed dreamily, already planning their imaginary wedding. As Long and Hao walked back to their class, Hao seemed a little lost in thought. Ying's words echoed in his mind, how there weren't any top male players in Heroes X Alliance. He started wondering where legends had disappeared to. Maybe they were stuck playing dress-up games in some remote corner of this messed-up world. He made a mental note to check out some game live streams when he got the chance. Even so, one thought still bothered him: how could he even be a real man in this world? Just then, something caught his eye. A lonely girl sitting by the window, quiet and distant. Hao nudged Long and asked about her. That's when he found out her name, Yuehua, a transfer student who had recently joined their class. He saw Long's panicked side eye and immediately smirked. The look on Long's face screamed crush alert. Hao leaned in with that devilish grin and asked if his dear friend had a thing for her. Long, red as a tomato, admitted she was kind of beautiful. Before Long could blink, Hao sprang up like a knight on a dumb quest, dragging Long with him. He declared loudly that if Long liked her, then it was go time. He told Long to man up. Long flailed behind him, whisper shouting, begging him to stop. But Hao, waving him off like a hero, ignoring all good advice, saying that kind of mindset was ancient history. In this new era, where real men made the first move. Besides, wouldn't it feel kinda wrong leaving the poor new girl marinating in loneliness? They finally made it to Yuehua's desk. Hao, ever the smooth operator, flashed his signature smile and introduced himself. Meanwhile, Long stood behind him like a haunted coat rack, trying to disappear into thin air. Yuehua looked up briefly, with the same enthusiasm. She muttered her name and went right back to her book, as if Hao's presence was nothing more than background noise. That hit Hao, as he was used to girls swarming him like bees to honey. But he felt strange that she didn't flinch. Trying again, he turned to introduce Long, but she still didn't care, so Hao switched tactics. He asked her about the book she was reading. Long, who by now had turned into a human tomato, whispered urgently for him to stop. Said it was clearly a no-go, she didn't want to talk. But Hao, being Hao, didn't back down. He straight up asked Yuehua if she just didn't feel like talking to them. That made her freeze. She didn't answer, just stared at him like she was trying to figure out if this guy was genuinely honest. Hao studied her face for a moment. Something clicked. Maybe it wasn't disinterest. Maybe it was social anxiety. Then, as if making a decision, he extended his hand toward her. Told her if she ever wanted someone to talk to, he was around. Surprisingly, Yuehua looked at his hand, then reached out and took it. Hao grinned. In his head, he felt like he just unlocked a major mission flag. A real man doesn't turn away from someone in need. Especially not a girl trying her best to exist quietly. Right at that moment, Yuan popped up like she'd been summoned by fate. She spotted Hao and Long hanging out with a new girl and immediately perked up. Seeing the opportunity, Hao hatched another plan on the spot. He shoved Yuan right in front of Yuehua and declared that it was time for their amazing social skills to shine. He asked Yuan if she'd like to be friends with Yuehua. The girl looked stunned but agreed. As Hao turned to leave, he heard Yuehua quietly thanking him. He gave a small nod, feeling oddly proud. Something about this felt manly. Like he really did something good. Maybe that silly mission progress bar should go up by at least 50%. Back at home, Hao sat in his room with earbuds in, music blasting, head bobbing like a rock star. A big smile was plastered across his face as he scrolled through his phone. In his mind, a real man listens to nothing but rock. He was completely lost in the beat when someone knocked on his door. It was Qin. She asked if she could come in. Hao told her to enter, but before her whole body even stepped in, her revealing plots made its grand entrance first. Hao blinked hard, as the hot dress she wore wasn't helping either. His brain lagged for a second. She noticed what he was doing and asked casually. Still recovering, he replied he was just listening to music. She caught the sudden shift in his behavior. He tried to act cool, but deep inside, he was screaming. This was the privilege of having a sexy older sister. He wasn't proud of that thought, but he wasn't exactly denying it either. Qin walked closer and pressed up her plots against him, asking if she could join in on his music. Hao froze as her warmth pressed against him. She leaned in to listen and commented that he liked rock music. Her voice low, eyes glowing with intrigue, she smiled and told him he was different from other boys, even captivating. She reached out, brushing her fingers toward his lips. Hao's thoughts spiraled. Who in their right mind could resist this kind of temptation? But then, another voice echoed inside him, wondering if this is part of the mission. He got pulled into a war inside his own head. On one side, the angel saying a real man must resist temptation. Strength isn't about giving in, it's about knowing when to hold back. Otherwise, he's no better than a beast. But the devil, he was laughing, said a real man knows when to act and doesn't waste golden chances like this. Letting this pass would make him no better than a coward. In a chaotic combo of panic and poor life choices, Hao suddenly grabbed Qin and shoved her back, maybe a tad too enthusiastically, that with a loud thud, she landed flat on the bed, and to his horror, he ended up on top like some kind of budget drama hero. Their eyes met, as time stopped. Qin's expression changed instantly, a playful glint in her eyes like she'd just cracked the plot twist. She smiled teasingly, thinking he was in the mood for some kind of play. Meanwhile, Hao's face turned tomato red. Sweat dripped like he'd just run a marathon. His trembling hand inched toward her plots, as his inner caveman roared, thinking he couldn't hold himself back any longer. Then, reality punched him square in the brain. Like he'd just snapped out of hypnosis, he flew off the bed faster than a squirrel on energy drinks. Qin sat up, confused by the sudden mood swing. Hao didn't even know what just happened. He stared at the floor, pale and lost. Qin leaned in, now genuinely worried, placing her hands on his shoulders. She asked if he was okay. He muttered something about being anemic. He claimed he just needed some rest, while mentally thanking the heavens he didn't commit a full social disaster. Qin then suddenly hugged him, His face sank into her soft, warm plots. Hao, though still shaken, couldn't help but enjoy her gentle body against his face. And just when he thought he might die of bliss, Qin whispered with a devilish smile that he was such a good boy. Trying to change the topic, Hao suddenly asked if she thought he'd look good with a shorter haircut. Qin smiled warmly as saying she'd support whatever decision he made. Hao couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Qin. There was a strange vibe in the way she smiled, in the way she held him. But he brushed it off, telling himself it didn't matter for now. He had more important things to do, like getting a haircut. After all, if he was serious about becoming a real man in this world, the first step had to be changing his hairstyle. Before he knew it, he was standing in front of a haircut shop. The moment he stepped inside, a cheerful lady approached him, welcoming him. She told him he was beautiful and that someone like him deserved the best stylist in the entire salon. Hao, completely uninterested in flattery, told her he just wanted a simple haircut. Another lady soon appeared, the one who seemed to be the barber. She smiled and asked what kind of style he was going for. Hao sat down in the chair as she wrapped the cutting cloth around him. Without hesitation, he told her he wanted a buzz cut, the shortest possible. He even said she could just chop it off however she liked. It didn't even need to look good. The barber stared at him, slightly stunned. She had never heard such a bizarre request in her career. She looked at Hao through the mirror and, after a moment, concluded that he was just like most men, saying one thing but meaning another. There was no way this handsome guy genuinely wanted to look bad. Rolling up her sleeves, she decided to take matters into her own hands. After a long while, when she finally stepped back and asked him to take a look, Hao glanced at himself in the mirror. To his surprise, it actually looked pretty good. The short haircut suited him well. He gave a confident nod, thinking that as expected of himself, he couldn't look bad even if he tried. The barber, clearly impressed by her own work, asked if she could take a picture of him for the salon's portfolio. She even said he wouldn't have to pay if he agreed, but Hao politely declined. She leaned in closer, slipped a card into his hand, and told him that if he ever came back, he should look for her. She added with a sly smile that she also offered other services that would surely leave him satisfied. Hao accepted the card with a chuckle, thinking that maybe being a heartthrob in this world wasn't so bad after all. Back at home, he stood in front of the mirror again, admiring his new haircut. It wasn't the most macho look, but he had to admit, he still looked ridiculously handsome. Feeling refreshed, he decided it was time to start anew in this strange, reversed world. With renewed confidence, he stepped toward his cupboard, eager to find an outfit that matched his fresh style. But the moment he opened it, his excitement died. Inside hung nothing but girly clothes. He stared in disappointment, realizing he needed to find time to get rid of all these clothes. Hao was standing on the roof, enjoying the breeze, when he heard his father's voice calling up to him, asking for help with something. He climbed down and approached his dad, casually asking if there was a lot that needed doing. But the moment his father turned around and laid eyes on him, his expression froze. Shock washed over the dad's face like a crashing wave. For a moment, he just stood there, stunned. Then, all at once, his eyes widened, his body trembled, and in a furious storm of emotion, he grabbed Hao by the shoulders and began shaking him. With disbelief and rage, he asked what had happened to his hair. Who had dared to cut it that short? Boys weren't supposed to have such short hair. What on earth was Hao thinking? He looked like he was on the verge of tears, dramatically declaring that he needed to find the barber responsible and give them a piece of his mind. Hao, unfazed, tried to calm him down. He explained that it had been his own decision. His hair was too long and it was getting hot, so he went for a change. His father's face twitched. He stood there like a bomb that had just detonated in slow motion. The next moment, using the ancient parenting techniques, he snatched a slipper and began smacking it against Hao's face with full force, demanding to know who had given him permission to do such a thing. He shouted that Hao had no idea how important looks were. What if no woman ever liked him again? Hao yelled back, trying to block the hits, telling his dad to stop. Just then, the front door opened and Qin stood frozen at the doorway, blinking like she'd walked into a soap opera mid-season. The moment Hao saw her, Hao clung to her, sobbing loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Qin smiled slyly for a brief second, as if silently celebrating some hidden victory, then quickly switched and urged their dad to calm down. She asked what had happened, and their father, clearly frustrated, explained that Hao had cut his hair without telling anyone. How could he not be upset? Kin glanced at House Buzz cut, which sparked World War III. Meanwhile, Hal clung to her like a street cat begging for scraps of affection. Of course, his eyes wandered upward, catching more than just comfort from her melons, but he kept his face innocent. Standing by his side, Kin calmly told their father that Hal's haircut actually looked great. It made him appear cleaner and more refreshed. She promised to talk to Hal about it later, but for now, urged their dad to let it go. Still fuming like a kettle, their dad finally gave in under Kin's diplomatic aura. He grumbled something about her spoiling Hal, shot one last death glare at his son, and stomped off toward the kitchen, warning Hal to count himself lucky. Once the coast was clear, Hal exhaled. He looked at Kin with grateful eyes and said if she hadn't stepped in, he might have ended up bald. Kin smiled softly, telling him she was his older sister. It was her job to protect him. Then, as if remembering something, she said she had something for him and invited him to her room. Hal's face lit up with excitement the moment she mentioned it. Entering her room felt like being given a key to paradise. In his heart, he thought this was the real reason he had been reincarnated into this world. Inside, Kin walked over to a shelf, pulled out a small box, and said she had been too busy during the move to prepare a proper gift, but now she wanted him to have this. She opened the box and held it out, asking if he liked it. Hal blushed a little, saying it must be expensive. But she just smiled and told him not to worry about that. If there was anything else he liked, she'd buy that too. As she handed it to him, Hal stared wide-eyed, feeling like the pampered wife of a wealthy CEO. Back in his room, Hal sat on a chair, holding diamonds as he closely examined. The way they sparkled under the light made him wonder just how much they must have cost. He felt a bit guilty receiving such an expensive gift without giving anything in return. It only seemed fair that he should find something nice for Sister Kin too. But reality hit hard when he pulled out his phone and checked his bank balance. After the haircut, all he had left was a pitiful amount, barely enough to buy a piece of candy, let alone a return gift. He sighed, staring at the screen in frustration, wondering how he was supposed to afford anything meaningful. Just then, a message notification popped up. It was from Long, excitedly sharing great news that his new CEO romance novel was being published, where a link to the story was attached. That sparked an idea in Hal's mind. If Long could do it, maybe he could too. Writing a novel could be a quick way to make money. Maybe he could start off as a ghostwriter, earn a bit every day, and build from there. Motivated, Hal jumped onto his computer, opening a search for popular writing niches. He browsed through job boards and forums, checking out what stories were in demand. He came across a listing looking for someone to continue a male lead novel, but it didn't excite him, as it just didn't feel like his thing. Then he scrolled down to another option, a story about a female soldier king. Then came a category called urban fiction for girls. That one caught his attention. As he read more, a smile spread across his face. A wild idea formed in his head, turning his own experience in this strange, reversed world into a novel suddenly crossed his mind. Realizing it was the full package, drama, comedy, gender flips, and just enough romance to make readers lose their minds. He decided right then and there, he would name it Alter Gender Wonderland. A tale about a guy who wakes up in a world where he's a total man magnet. The title alone made him chuckle. He had a feeling it could really blow up. Will Hal ever find his way back to the world he once knew, or will he end up drowning in a paradise full of hot baddies? Comment Wonder Womenland if you're eager to find out in our part 2. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.